of the conference also is collaborate together to reach the impact. Yeah. So we have some awesome panelists with us today, all of whom have been associated with using technology, with using data in the commons, or in ways that work in this commoning spirit of building systems that are in the community or building communities of people to use data. So let me quickly introduce, and then you really want to use this panel to get some ideas from. Yeah. So we have Ashwin over here. Ashwin works with the Mutual Contribution Foundation, which, as you may know, they work with us in building action, ecological action. We have Sarah from Regenesis. Regenesis has been working a lot with young people, adolescents, and youth for community action, of how they can be change makers in their areas. We have Shivangi. Shivangi is with the CEPC Center for Data and Transformation. Shivangi was earlier also with geospatial work, so she comes with a very strong technology background of using remote sensing data, geospatial data, and how that can drive climate action. And we have Vicky. Vicky is with IIT Bombay in the Center for Policy Studies, and Vicky has a very strong history of being associated with the commons movement. So he actually started the Creative Commons Platform in India way back in 2007, and he's been looking at a lot of policy aspects of how data and technology is being used in the social sector, in the governance sector, and so on. Yeah. Cool. So we'll start off with some discussions within the panel, and then of course we'll open it up to the audience. But since it's a small group, I think we can also be a bit informal. So if as people are speaking, if you have some things that you want to say, just raise your hand, and we can make it participatory. Yeah. Cool. So let's begin then. Yeah. Great. So I wanted to start with Ashwin. So Ashwin, you guys have been bringing out these fantastic reports on the state of Indian birds, and these reports are really built up through data contributed by people, right? In this what is known as citizen science. So can you tell us more about how these communities come together? How do you nurture them? And then, of course, taking all of this data from millions of people and making reports, driving policy action. So there's a whole chain. So just illuminate us on some of that.
Hello. Hello? Yeah. So hi, everyone. To start off, does everybody know what birdwatching is? How many people in this room are birdwatchers? Okay, that's amazing. That's actually almost 50% of the room. I don't know whether it's a coincidence. But it's what makes birdwatching such an amazing avenue for public participation, because there are so many people who are already doing it, and birds that way are a common resource. Everybody wants them around them, and everybody gets to see and enjoy birds, whether you're in the city or you're away from the cities, in a purely in a place that's far away from access. Everywhere you have birds and you can enjoy them. So I'll take a step back. First, State of India's birds. It's this report that I think 13 organizations came together to produce, and the report was based on about 50 million rows of data collected by the public. These are observation data of birds that people have seen. It has information about where and when, and all of this data was uploaded on a platform called eBird. And that's the first place where technology has really enabled everything to come together. So birding, so citizen science, as we spoke about, citizen science, in my understanding, is public participation in every aspect of science there, right from generating the data to analyzing it to producing some knowledge. So the way it has worked over here, this system is that there have been bird watchers collecting data, writing things in their notebooks for a really long time. They've had things on Yahoo groups, they've had things that are on many informal channels. But until 2014, there wasn't any public platform where people could collate this observation in some structured way. And that's where eBird as a tool really took us to the next level. It provided this platform that was not just a data collection platform, but it gave birdwatchers what they wanted in terms of organizing their birding lives. And I think that's what has really helped it grow. I would say a really large proportion of birdwatchers use this tool because it allows them to see their life lists. How many species have I seen in Delhi? How many have I seen in Bangalore? And all of these small bits of gamification that really help people continue using the platform. And the other side, there is a smaller set of people who use it because of the collective benefit. Everybody uploads their observations onto a common platform and is curated in some way, and therefore becomes accessible to all. So eBird is a free tool. The data is publicly accessible. Anybody can download it and make sense of it and try and generate knowledge. But there have been challenges in that it has started off right at the beginning. It was more an urban, a tool used in urban spaces by a small set of birdwatchers. Now there are about 50,000 birdwatchers around the country who contribute on eBird. And this has come through largely because of a collective called BirdCount India. So BirdCount India is an informal collective of a number of governmental and non-governmental bodies and individuals across the country. I think every state is represented. There's some organization or individual from every state who is a part of this collective, and everybody shares the same vision of bird monitoring. Bird monitoring so that everybody has the knowledge at their hands, has the data at their hands to be able to take decisions for local governance based on that data. And that is the primary driver for all of the organizations that are involved. So all of these organizations have done small things in their parts of the country to promote bird watching, to promote bird monitoring, to take just informal bird watching to the next step, and also to encourage people to start watching birds. A lot of the coordination happens on WhatsApp groups and other tech platform. WhatsApp has been really, really helpful in generating interest and getting people together. So I think a combination of a public tool, a well-designed tool, and some means to coordinate and organize has helped this ecosystem come together. I can say more, but maybe I'll wait for the discussion to build.
Yeah. No. But yeah, I think that's great, right? So a combination of a fun activity and some level of coordination, and it can bring us to a state where there's so much of data and stuff can be done with that. So Sarah, to go next to you, you work with youth on the ground and on things which may not be fun, like bird watching. So how do you do that? How do you make it exciting for them and guide them, right? So you have this, I was going through the website, you have what you call this top-down and bottom-up model. So maybe if you can explain what that is and why do you need this combination?
Is it okay if it's a little participatory? I would really like the audience to talk to me instead of me talking at you. How many of you have seen civic sanitation issues outside your street, your neighborhood, or your city? Potholes, garbage. So it's a very easy question to ask. How many of you have done something about it? Look around. Look around the room. Why do you think we hesitate? Why don't we do something about it?
We're bird watching.
We're busy bird watching. That was easy. There is a reason. It's not, do you guys want to do something about it? Yes. All of us do, right? Do you feel anger, emotion that this is not solving and your life is getting affected, right? But what stops us? What stops us are 2-3 things. What he spoke about, we don't think we have enough knowledge. We don't think we have enough skills. We think we're paying taxes and someone else is supposed to do it. We don't think our voice will be heard. So Reap Benefit works with young people to ensure that they have the voice. And they have knowledge, data in their hands so that they are able to take decisions they're able to bring agency into their lives. The tools to do it is through a tech platform, and the approaches that we have is ground up, bottom up, grassroots mobilization of young people, or a top-down approach. I'll just take one example of a top-down approach, and how it integrates is that young people coming through us through both of these approaches come into a community of sorts on the tech platform. And on the tech platform, which is human, which is emotional, which is contextual, which speaks to them, they're able to then connect with other people. They are able to get knowledge. They're able to build their skills, not just by being on the platform, but actually by going out and solving those problems. The role that the platform plays is that of a mentor. The platform nudges you. The platform tells you about policy, informs you, connects you to other people, because change making and problem solving is a very, very lonely journey. Most people don't do it because it's tough. It's not enjoyable. But whenever you have a challenging situation, having collaborators with you, having a community with you, whether it's online or offline, it helps. It helps you move along that journey. And when young people start doing, and that's what Reap Benefits credo is, we believe that the only thing that can change the system, that can change your reality, that can change you, is the act of doing. And the platform simply nudges you, allows you, empowers you to do. We at Reap Benefit, when we say bottom up and top down, we have these two approaches. But one example that we have is what we did in Assam with Jal Jeevan Mission. I think one of the panelists in the earlier morning panel spoke about Har Ghar Nal, but not Har Ghar Jal. In Assam, the problem was a little different. There are enough sources of water in Assam, but there is not enough safe water. Guwahati, as of now in 2022, the amount of arsenic and iron in the water has made it super critical, the safety of the drinking water. So the problem is Har Ghar Saaf Jal. And despite having FHTCs, which are functional household tap connections, people in rural Assam are not adopting these tap connections. And that's where the problem was. There was a mandate, there was a will, we need to provide safe drinking water, but there was no awareness and there was no implementation of this mandate. So what we did in Assam was that we mobilized young people from grade 8 to grade 12. We started with a very small 2-day workshop, and then used the tech platform to get them onto the tech platform. And then the tech platform drove the entire action for the last 1 year. We used to send them DIY activities. We used to send them information on the policy. They went and audited the water treatment plant. They went and reported. They took, we have around 2,500 plus crowdsourced data point from these young people on the floods that have happened in Assam. And this is reported back to the government. They've reported on broken pipelines, on Jal Mitra, or the person who takes care of the water treatment plant not being there, dysfunctional water treatment plant. They've gone and interviewed their families. They've spoken to the water user committee. The amount of awareness that they have built in their communities has led to, in fact, Majuli district, the entire district is now adopted the water scheme and is now paying a water user fee, which was unheard of 7 months ago. This policy now has become a national policy in India, where education department has taken it up and said, we want this kind of initiative across all schools in India. CBSE has mandated it across schools. And it just started by young people taking actions. So the power doesn't just lie in the tool. The power lies in what you do with the tool and how you use the tool to interact with the person behind the tool. And we felt that young people, their world is very different from ours actually, and they respond a lot more to online communities than we did. That's one realization I had as a school teacher, that, oh my God, this is not homework. This is something they're doing outside of home. And the incentive that they are getting, more than the certificate, more than the rewards, was the social recognition. The ability for them to be called as change maker in their village was life transforming for them. And we have many such stories, which I would love to share if you have the time later on. But so far, this is one of the top-down approaches. Right now, we are working with 1 million people young people across India. More than 100,000 of them are on the platform, active, engaging. The idea is, how do we create a network, and how do we keep their journey alive through the platform and beyond the platform through the on-ground communities?
Great. So in both cases, the platform, there was this role of technology to provide a platform for engagement, for data collection, and so on. Yeah. So Shivangi, it would be great to hear from your experiences, right, of building similar platforms for geospatial data and so on, and how they have been used for climate action or conservation or commons, basically. Yeah.
So, thank you, Adi. Before I start, I just want to ask one question. How many of you are well versed with geospatial technologies? Because in most of the cases, it becomes a jargon. Okay. Okay, versed with geospatial technology. Now I change my question. How many of you use geospatial technology? For those जिन्होंने हाथ नहीं उठाया, have you ever used Ola and Uber? That means you are using geospatial technology. You use GPS to navigate. You might have used GPS to navigate to come to this location. That means you are using geospatial technology. So Ola and Uber, they are actually the platforms of making geospatial technology more inclusive without even people knowing that they are using geospatial technologies. Most of them, when we say geospatial technology, it becomes a rocket science. Okay, what you are doing? You're doing something with satellite images and all those things. Okay, fine, it is a rocket science, but when we say it is making life easy, then it has to be in an application-ready format. So our work primarily is to make geospatial data more inclusive to different sectors in an application-ready format, because everybody do not understand data, geospatial data or geospatial technology. So these are one of the examples. Similarly, just imagine if a farmer can get an application where he can identify the exact location in his field where he has to apply the fertilizer, which position in his field is facing depletion, in the nutrition, so that he can apply fertilizer only to that specific area, cost effective and enhance productivity for a farmer. So these kind of application we are trying to develop. Again, everything location based. Geospatial means what is where. Location specific. Not only this, what was where 10 years back. You can get the same. So this is the beauty of using geospatial data, because you can analyze the environmental change over a period of time. You can analyze how your forest looked like 10 years back and what's the status right now. How a water body looked like 10 years back. Do we have a water body at that place or not right now? So, but again, it cannot be done. It cannot be, incorporated into the workflow of all the sectors until and unless you make it application ready for these sectors to understand, to access it, and to use it. Right now, Ola and Uber use karna, it's so easy, right? You just have to enter your location, where you are standing, where you want to go. Everything is being done at the background. But exactly what it is doing, it is identifying your location and the nearby cab. So the base is geospatial technologies. So if we talk about climate actions, so what we are doing is we are actually trying to develop climate-based applications where when we talk about climate change, we need so many data. For example, we want the change in temperature, we want the change in the vegetation cover, we want to know the different parameters, the precipitation, X by Z. So we bring all those parameters at one particular platform, link it to the location values of a specific area, making it more location enabled, and then we analyze the data and come out with the solution for a specific problem. So the base thing which I think is to understand what is the problem, and it is not necessary to use these jargons to come out with the solution. This is all being done at the background. So right now we are primarily working in making this data more inclusive, into the workflows of various sectors, not only climate. So it's like agriculture sector, infrastructure sector, water sector. So we are working with 8 prime sectors right now and identifying what are the ground level problems and how the solution can be. We can come out with the solution using these technologies, of course, integrated with other allied technologies like AI and ML, big chain, block, all the 4 IR technologies.
Great. Yeah. So actually, just wanted to say that the way you're talking about platforms, you're actually suggesting that we can think in terms of building blocks of different kinds of data sets, and on top of those, different applications and different use cases can be built. Yeah. So while we're using the word platform, but just to draw a distinction that the platforms that Reap Benefit and NCF are talking about are, I mean, we, of course, among other things, it's also
the national level platform, or you may call it as a data repository kind of, a hub.
Right. So platforms for coordinating, and then platforms which can serve as data hubs on which new innovations can be built. So Shishir, that sort of leads into all the work that you've been doing, that to make such platforms more powerful, you need data to sort of be fed into it, and open source, open data, all of these are ways to make the data more accessible so that new innovations can be built. So it will be great to hear from your experience of where is India in this whole journey, and where can we go? What are the opportunities?
Yeah, so I'm Shishir Jha. I'm faculty at the Shang Desai Center for Policy Studies. So there is a Policy Studies Center even in IIT, which has perhaps interesting potential, because the tech and policy people don't talk to each other, and I think we need to desperately do that. So I just want to step back a little bit in the sense that one of the interests for me to sort of work in broadly what one could call the digital economy, one of the interests was the potential that the digital economy had, and that was one of the big stories and narratives that one constantly heard. I'm talking much, early 90s, etc. That the potential for considerable opening up, considerable democratization of, creating a value, or the social context could be opened up much more through internet, through digitization. Now, from that period, I'm not saying everything is completely pessimistic, but from that early 90s to, say, 2024, you see a huge shift in what has happened to that potential, right? And I'm going to come back to this again in some time. But what I'm trying to say here is that there is, again, and has been sort of mentioned by the earlier speakers, there is a whole host of things that one can do with data. Yet, when we see the landscape of how the amount of data that is being, sort of generated, and I'm talking about other kinds of platforms. The ones you mentioned are the ones which are actually productive and useful. But the big tech platforms, for instance, right? There's so much potential for what one could do with that data. Simple example, you mentioned, say, Ola and Uber, right? The fact that city-level data is being, captured, right? People who are moving from point A to point B within the city, and that data can be hugely beneficial for better sort of traffic management of the city, right? Increasingly, our cities are getting more and more congested, and we heard about that in the morning session also. And it's very much possible. There are cities in the world which are trying that, right? So here is an opportunity that is kind of foreclosed, if you want to say that, because perhaps the policies and the imagination of our government has not been stirred in that direction, right? And data in that way, the great part of it is that non-rivalrous, right? Uber and Ola can still hold on to that data and still be able to benefit whichever city it is that they. So I would, at least 3 kinds of data that I see, which we can talk about separately, among others. One is the legacy data, right, that government holds on to, which again, we've been hearing again and again that, we don't see enough of that, right? Census, well, you can get, but other kinds of data that government does have, but you're not able to access it. Two is the kind of data that is emerging from users that was mentioned. And three is the kind of big tech, if you want to call it, big tech data. So it'll be interesting to talk about perhaps strategies which are perhaps different for each of these sectors. Where I want to move next to is that, the potential, as I said early, in the very early part, as I was speaking, potential has been kind of transformed into something that really needs to overcome, and policy direction is very required, right? So we are almost in a situation of an anti-commons, right? We want to move to a commons. When I say we are in a situation of anti-commons, because the possibility exists. We have several players who could benefit enormously with the exchange of data, with the usage of data, but because of impediments around policy and maybe other technical problems, we are not able to put together, right, a coherent strategy, coherent vision about what this data, could help us do, right? So that's one part. You mentioned about, for instance, Creative Commons, right? I'm not sure if people probably know about it. How many of you have heard about Creative Commons? Quite a few, okay. But if you just think about Creative Commons, it's really a very simple solution to a problem which was unnecessary to begin with, right? So what is the unnecessary problem? That copyright is a bundle of rights. Why do you need to bundle rights which most of the times the author himself or herself does not want, right? The bundling of rights has come more because of largely intermediaries, right? Intermediaries meaning those who want to use your rights as the author, right? If I'm writing a book, I sign away my rights to a publisher. So the intermediaries, the publishers, etc., right? It's given their constant pushing of the legislation process, right? Now you have in India, copyright is life of the author plus 60 years. Other countries, the life of the author plus 100 years. It's ridiculous, right? It doesn't make any economic sense to have that kind of bundling of rights, that kind of imposition in preventing the circularity of cultural goods, right? Music, whatever it is that you're doing. So Creative Commons came in as an interesting, simple solution that, well, on the one hand is obviously you can put your stuff in the public domain, no questions asked, people can use it in any way. On the other extreme is copyright, all rights reserved, right? And Creative Commons says, well, if you want to hold on to some rights, it's some rights reserved. Right? For instance, one of the most basic rights is, well, do whatever you want with my work as long as you sort of cite it, right? Reference it. So often the solutions to a lot of our, problems are actually simple, but then the cost of doing that for people who are entrenched in the system, right? That's very problematic, right? And that is where policy really needs to come in and say, well, no, we need to shift from where we are at to another solution. And once we have that, I think, people are able to make that shift from X to Y, right? So that's one. I could come back with, other thoughts later, but let me just say that as an introduction.
Yeah. No, that was super interesting. Yeah. So just to kind of put everything in context, right? I think what we've seen is one aspect is thinking in terms of platforms, which tend to be more scalable. Another part about understanding the communities that we're creating around these platforms. How can the platform support them, help coordinate, help inspire, right? And Sarah and Ashwin talked about, right, all these interesting strategies around that. And then, so if we connect it with the commons and the commoning process, I think we can start seeing the similarities that how can we encourage how can we think about technology and platforms that encourage people to talk to each other and share data, build communities also of creators who can build applications on top of these. And then some of the very interesting points that Shishir brought out, that how do we also think about incentives which move away from this mindset of this is mine, this is yours, right, and more into a commons, right, which is a common space for people to contribute. So I think that's awesome, and so some very great insights that all of us got from this. So if we go one level deeper into many of these things, right, when we talk about different types of data and crowdsourced data that Ashwin spoke about, making it available and open is of course awesome, but maybe let's also hear from Ashwin about some of the challenges that go into this, right? Because when things are happening through amateurs and so on, right? Then how does that work? And what are the frustrations and what sort of processes have you guys built around it?
Thanks, Adi. Yeah, so at least in the space of birdwatching data, the challenge is not so much in generating the data. The data is generated, the data is available, and it's growing. There are multiple people generating more data. But how can this data really be used for the benefit of the commons? And that's a space where I think it's been quite a challenge, because that requires a completely different set of skills, different kinds of training that typically people who are collecting the data don't have. So something that Sarah and I spoke about is when we have a data set like this, who's actually going to analyze this data set and bring something out? Typically, I would imagine very few people in the room have analyzed eBird data, although it's available, and used it for something. Has anyone done so? Yeah, so one challenge is there are so many people who can do so much good with this kind of data, especially for ONEs, for example. There's so many people concerned about ONEs. There's some strong data showing that birds are declining really rapidly in ONEs, and these are some of our culturally most important birds, many endemics. So this kind of data is available. Even data summarized data is available. But to actually make a little more of that for your local space and take it to policymakers, etc., nobody is actually doing that, taking the data through. So to address that challenge, SOIB, there was an attempt made in creating a tool called Myna that would take results from SOIB and create something, give a set of results for a polygon of interest. Now the thing is, now that tool is available, but again, uptake of the tool has been very sporadic and only in certain places. And so that's a bit of a challenge. How do more people make use of this data? How do even birdwatchers? So birdwatchers, because they're involved in the system right from the start, they're generating the data. They have a lot of questions about what to do next, about what best can be done with that data. So the intent is there, but the training is not there to analyze it, and the computational ability is not there to analyze it. So that's another challenge. There are people who are interested in doing something with the data. They don't have the training to do something with it, and people who have the training to do something with the data aren't doing anything with that data. And then finally, its impact is far, far less than what we'd like it to be. So I think I'm looking for solutions here. I'm sure there are some things that can be done, but.
I had a question. Yeah. So even when you're at the design stage, when you're designing a platform, are most organizations thinking of building knowledge platforms? Because that's what they sound like. Even when you're engaging citizens, you're collecting information to make people aware. What about the tech teams thinking about intelligence platforms itself? And then we speak about interoperability. If someone is collecting bird data, someone is collecting tree data, how do we get the tech teams of different organizations involved to standardize language, syntax, schema, and then think of layering and getting those indicators that we're speaking about? Have those conversations happen in the school? Just curious about that.
Question. I'm not sure that I'm best placed to answer that broadly, but to do with biodiversity data itself, there's an attempt being made by GBIF, the Global Biodiversity Informational Facility, to bring together these various different kinds of data and try and make sense of it. I don't think the answer is there yet, because it's still grappling with because these data sets are so different in the way they're collected. So to have some kind of common inference is not easy, but I don't have the answer.
Shivang?
Yes. Okay, I would like to. Okay, I would like to add. Okay. Yeah, sure.
You said something, we don't have the answers. The thing in my mind is, are people asking questions to like our engagement with these benefits, like those young people are asking some questions that are very, very good, right? And how does that kind of fit into the people asking the questions? Are we helping people ask the right questions? That kind of thing, then it's just a thought, I think,
Okay, I would like to add in here, in terms of geospatial technology and the geospatial data, right? We have National Geospatial Policy in place now. National Geospatial Policy was came out in 2022, and now we are in 2024. We are trying our best to implement that policy on ground. Now, it talks about 14 data themes. So they have identified 14 data themes which are defined by United Nations, like you have road network, building footprints, water bodies. So they are all total 14. For every theme, there is one government body allotted as a nodal agency. For example, for building footprints, MoHUA, Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. For land parcels, Department of Land Resources. For forest cover, FSI. So for every theme, departments. Now, what's the biggest challenge? It is everything is stated there that you need to have a common standards so that the data is interoperable, so you can integrate it. All the layers should be there because they want to come out with a national digital twin by 2035. Now, the challenge is in India, we work at state level. Now, DOLR has allotted this to different states. Now, every state is digitizing their own land parcels without any common standards. Some are using drones for data collection, some are using high-resolution satellite imageries for data collection, some are using ground-level surveys for the data collections. Now, the biggest challenge which they are facing is integrating all that data together at one platform because there were no standards. The data is not interoperable, although it is mentioned in the policy. So these kind of challenges, yes, I agree, we are facing. However, everything is mentioned. Still, the implementation in India, in the area where we work at state level, it is little difficult bringing the things together. But yes, this is what I'm telling in terms of geospatial data. Yeah, so where the policy is in place, everything is there, it's written, and we are facing this challenge. And now we are trying to start from A. Like everyone has developed their own data. So much of investment was done in digitalization of land records, Swamitwa project, national level project, drone, and XYZ. And now we are starting from A again, coming out with standards first. Now we are going to OGC to come out with geospatial standards, and now again the data will be generated. Right? And the same data, for example, DOLR or Ministry of Panchayati Raj, they have developed the land parcels. Now with the new revised financials, Agriculture Ministry has to come out with the same kind of land parcels where they have to link the farmers' data with those land parcels. When the land parcels are already available with one ministry, why you are doing it again? And all the industries are running after Ministry of Agriculture now to get that project. So that, okay, we will digitize it for you. We did it for Swamitwa also. Why can't you share the same data? Where is that common platform? Why that data cannot be open? Among the ministries itself, they work in silos. So this is again the second biggest challenge in India.
I'd just like to, so there are 3-4 challenges that we work with, but just to address the question in the room. So this question, of course, we had loads of data, and this was crowdsourced data by young people, citizens, which was coming in different thematics. So what we've done is that we've created like a data portal, a citizen-centric data portal called Samaj Data, which have now turned into a collective. So what we're inviting is that 5-6 organizations have actually joined hand to bring their data together. The idea is that how does this data make meaning to a person who is looking to make meaning from that data? How does this data affect me? What do I do with it? So it's not just data lying there, but intersectional data talking to each other, making meaningful narratives from that, and then taking it and giving it back to the user for them to use it in whichever way it serves their purpose. That's why we turned it into a collective, because we know this needs collaboration, it needs networking, it needs hundreds of organizations putting their data together. So while you spoke about something that happens at a national state level, and that is important, from the citizens level also crowdsourced data can be integrated, and you don't need actually hundreds of people working in our back office. We're actually doing it with AI. AI can actually now integrate that data, create narratives, whatever prompts you want. It is helping us create these narratives, and just that the data is being now, the thing what we call is closing the loop. I have given you a data point. You've made some sense of it. You've connected it. For example, Safe Yali gave us data on streets which had harassment in Bangalore, streets where harassment incidents were occurring, connecting it to low lighting in the electricity, which was not working, electrical lamps were not working on the streets. That data was talking to each other. It's intuitive, but when you support it with data, there is chance of policy change. There is chance of advocacy. There is chance of some action to be taken. So that crowdsourced data can be used by a young person, by a citizen, by a policy maker, can speak to a government policy. That's what we are attempting to do. And yeah, Adi was right in terms of who is asking that question.
Maybe.
Just to sort of take a step back, right? When it comes to data, we often sort of tie ourselves up in knots because there is something called data that is collected for not any purpose specifically. Just to get the state of the art in place, right? Whether you're talking about census, when you're talking about NSSO, that kind of data, right? You just want to know overall pictures. Then there's very targeted data, the case that you were talking about with birds and other cases, or data that many of us in this room collect, very specific to our needs and objectives, right? Now the thing is, when we think about use cases, the question that you were asking, who uses it, how do they use it? Unfortunately, most of us forget that when we want to put this data out. We tend to put this data out and then ask questions, oh, why is nobody using it? Or how do people use it, right? So it should be the first question that we start from. And that makes a lot of sense then to start building the pieces that we would like to work with. So I think, thanks for pointing out about stories. One of the interesting things also when we think about this is not everybody needs the same rigor and quality of the data. You were talking about the geospatial data, right? If you want to make policy decisions, the data has to be spot on. There is absolutely no budging on that. But if somebody just wants to understand where are public streets, public lights in cities in India, you can start with a bad set and then you can prune it, right? And so if somebody wants to just create an infographic saying, these are the problems when it comes to birds in urban India, you can start with a rough set and then you can prune it. So also to think about different use cases and different procedures by which you arrive at this is a very critical element, because a researcher and an activist don't need the same data rigor. And the same data sets don't need to be provided to both of them, right? And at the same time, when we talk about interoperability, again, it's something that we need to, let's say, be a little more careful about, if I may use the term. Because one of the challenges with interoperability often is that at a data level, you can either think about interoperability at the lowest granularity, or you can think of interoperability at the metadata level. And it serves it serves two different purposes and two different needs. And it's perfectly fine for both of them to coexist in the same space, right? Often we don't do that. Again, we tie ourselves up in not saying this cannot happen. And the last quick point is, whenever we want to talk about putting such data out, I think one of the things that nonprofits, and as a large piece of nonprofits, what we haven't done well is attribute other people's work. Historically, the nonprofit space has been very bad when it comes to attributing other organizations' work. right? Whether that's practice, whether that's culture, whether that's training, whichever it is, I think there are some steps to be taken in that space. And I think the last piece about skills to use this data, also often when we talk about data, people tend to think of data as geospatial on a map or data as numbers. There is much more to data, and right now we do have the tools to be able to handle all of these different kinds of data, right? So I think we need to sort of start opening up our imagination a bit when it comes to types of data.
So please also introduce yourself as you speak. So
Sorry,
that
can
was
I-
Bharat from Tarkam. This was Akshay from Uloi Labs and Anusha from the Tech for Good community. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
Hi. Acha, we're talking about data and tech and the uses of it, and which is broadly acceptable sort of argument. But because the way the session is framed is around the governance, what I want to ask you particularly is about the biases of the data. Because I feel like we haven't been able to address or talk about it. Of course, there are platforms. Of course, there's a lot of data. But what is it? Does it come to answer the question of equity when it comes to commons and the use of commons? I feel like, I would like to know from the panelists, how is that question addressed at all?
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for raising that point. And just to add to, so I just jumped in so that we can also respond to that. I just also feel that in this conversation, and true to the spirit of, because it's in the context of a larger conversation on commons and commoning, it's, I think, too much of the central question of who is designing a digital technology to answer or to respond to what crisis. If that's the central question, I think this honest admission needs to be made that it's too dominated by technology groups and part of it. I'm not saying it's othering anyone, but we just simply don't have enough farmer groups sitting and designing what land tenancy recording should look like. We don't have enough street vendors designing what a PM Swanidhi app should be like. We don't have enough RT activists designing how much information needs to be in the public domain. So that the question, actually that itself is an arena that needs to be commoned, and there are just too many tech experts in that, and they need to be far more ordinary people and common people placing that question of what digital technology needs to be designed to actually solve what problem. What is the problem that needs a technical solution? So instead of looking, we have a hammer in our hands and we're looking for a nail to hound, as opposed to actually trying to design it the other way around. So, and the other thing that I also wanted to park as an extension of that question to all of us and to everybody here is, again, just in this question of commons, how we can't make it agnostic to politics. We say community, we know exactly who's in that community. When we say something is open to a community to nurture, we know that it's co-opted by the upper castes. We can't talk about community as a generic term. There is politics within a community, and when it's left unsaid, the dominant take over. So even in the case of digital technology, how are we actually holding ourselves to a standard that we're ensuring that any digital technology, in the name of all these wonderful things we all really genuinely intend to do, how much of it is reinforcing a power imbalance and how much of it is actually breaking a power imbalance? So something like a Nammayatri, which is touted as the answer to oppressive other taxi aggregators, how much of it is really changing a labor-employee relationship, and how much of it is it's really not? It's reinforcing, just changed from a commission to a subscription. So just how much of those questions do we also ask ourselves of how much are we reinforcing a power imbalance and how much are we breaking it? And for all of us to reflect.
So maybe if we can reflect on this, and then let's take a couple of more questions.
Same point. I am Jaya, and I work with the Department of Society and Technology Interface at the Central University of Rajasthan. So it's a very specific, specialized kind of a department, and we try to look at how technology can be useful, or what are the interfaces, implications, applications on society, with society, and what can be done. So as a group, I think, as ma'am said, and then the conversation is going on in a direction that data primarily right now is designed or confined for the urban spaces. And when we're talking about commons, looking at the village commons, we are not till now, we've not been able to use data and digital technology to preserve or to help to sustain our commons, specifically village commons, because there is a gap to understand technology and data, because somebody sitting in some village would not be able to understand GIS, how to make sense of that particular process or the mechanism or the system. Also, digital divide is there. Access to technology might not be there. I think there are a number of issues that are creating this gap. So can we think of convergence or translating data or the complexities of data of the systems that we have? It's very simple to use Ola and Uber because we know how it works. But can we simplify, or can we reach to the local person, common person, localization, contextualization basically, to understand how to map a land, common land or common water, or see the differences? I mean, I feel that we need to think about this, that, how can we understand the technology space, which is not just urban, it can be rural also, I think. Thank you.
No, very valid. I think there's three things, right? One, do we even need a hammer? Or do we just need a mutti? Or do we need something else? Second, in whose hand are we placing this hammer? And that's where we're saying, right, should it be in the hands of the community? Or how can the hammer be shaped so that it's in the hands of the community, right? And the third thing which you mentioned, is it a good hammer at all? Or is it biased? Or is there some problems with it? So I think it'll be great, to hear reflections, and maybe we start with Shishir, yeah?
Yeah, I think brilliant questions and brilliant observations. Doing justice to all of them will be difficult. I'll just make maybe 2-3 points. One is at the level of just governance, right? And that itself is a word that has several internal ways that you can differentiate it. Right? So in terms of governance, the one stark difference, I'm not saying they're partitioned neatly, but the stark difference is perhaps between a social imagination that is seeing several problems around, right, which the panelists have sort of said themselves. A social imagination is really impatient in a good way to address these problems. And we also know that increasingly we are finding tools, right, technological tools, data tools that could at some level address these problems. And yet, I think as I was saying earlier, alluding to the fact that even in a place like IIT Bombay, which has obviously a tech kind of, legacy to it, a policy school does find it, and I'm saying it in good faith, does find it difficult to be able to have, deep conversations about questions about increasingly because policy and tech are integrated. So how does the social and the technological imagination really kind of reach out to each other, data part also, and find those spaces where even if they're low-hanging fruits, right, can we do something, right? And Ashwin was saying that, okay, I don't know what is the next step, right? And there are ways to think about it. I'm not saying I have the answers, right? So that I think is considerably there in a lot of conversations, but yet we're not able to address them. And I don't know, what is a good way? One could have thoughts about it. The other is that, well, even if that problem is not per se solved, but there are low-hanging fruits which data can begin to do. But the challenge there is about the trust, about trust of what to do, who's gathering the data, whose hands it is, how trustworthy is that, right? And I think there the community has to step up. Because although the government does say perhaps that it is a representative of the people, but I think there is probably more trust that can be gained if community were to also figure out ways. I'm not saying it's an easy thing. Figure out ways to be able to think about, well, say waste management in Powai, right, where I'm in, right, or even in an institution like this. How do you better manage waste, right? There are ways of thinking about it. So can we also step outside a particular way of thinking about governance which is located, entirely within the formal government structure? So these are just two thoughts I have with
Okay, thank you. I would say that data is nothing until and unless you are able to get some insights out of data. Simple. Data everywhere, but you are not able to use even a single, coming out anything fruitful out of it. It's useless. So I want to give one simple example. Like we were working with Mahila Housing Trust. And technology is one aspect. The project which was given to us was to identify the flood vulnerability zones in that area. And the people who are working in Mahila Housing Trust, they were facing those issues of waterlogging every year and a lot of in the Alwar rural areas. We use GeoAI technology to predict the flood vulnerability zones, but how we made them understood, right? For them, that was a different part. That is one thing. Now, we took it to the grassroots level, making them understand, showing the map of that area. Okay, fine. Next year, जब अगले season में बारिश होगी, तो this is the zone where you will be finding the, inundation. या यहाँ पर आपको पानी की waterlogging दिखाई देगी. And the base work was, what is the slope of that area, right? And what is the drainage pattern? Everything was done using geospatial technology. But this gap, we need to have that kind of capacity building and the training sessions for the first responders. Similarly, we are trying to develop for the first responders of wildfire, forest fires. So we are developing early warning systems. On one hand, that's the technology aspect. How you make and first responders on ground aware of it. They will not understand that. They may not, at that time, they may not have having the access of mobile also. कि उनके पास SMS पहुंच रहा है क्योंकि fine यहाँ पर लग रही है आग, right? So these, I think, the biggest building block here is the capacity development. How the technology people can keep the technology aside and then make the layman understand, coming out with the solution. And as Adi also mentioned, काम शुरू करने से पहले ये जानना जरूरी है कि क्यों कर रहे हो, what are the challenges, किसके लिए करना है काम. And this communication between the researchers and the practitioners is missing. This communication, this gap needs to be bridged. Before you start a research, you should know why you are doing a research. इसकी ज़रूरत भी है on ground की नहीं तो हमने research तो कर ली, research करके वो papers में रखी हुई है. On ground नहीं utilize हो रही है क्योंकि practitioners की इसकी ज़रूरत ही नहीं है. So this is one thing. And the second thing, policy और strategy level पे अगर मैं बात करूं, हमारे पास national geospatial policy है जो कहता है कि data open करेंगे, एक repository होगी, everybody can use that data. But will the sector be able to use that data? क्योंकि हमारे पास sectoral policy में तो mandate है ही नहीं कि आपको use करना है geospatial data. Land administration policy में नहीं mention है, आपकी Forest Conservation Act में कहीं mention नहीं है. Then how the sector will be using it? Because for sectors it is not a mandate. So even if a national level policy is saying it is a mandate, but for sectors it is not a mandate. So we are not able to push the solutions there because they are not ready. And awareness. Awareness. Not सिर्फ मैं गाँव के लोगों की बात नहीं कर रही हूँ. Even our policy makers are not aware of it. One simple conversation, I was talking to a secretary level person of Mahua and making them understand कि digital twin बनाना आपकी responsibility है. For them, digital twin was a jargon. as a mandate, it is their responsibility, but even they are not aware of it. So I think awareness is the first thing, and solution, of course, understanding the problem and coming out with the right solution. And then make, जिनके लिए solution बनाया है, उन तक पहुंचाना और उनको समझाना. That is the biggest thing.
I'm not attempting to respond to any of the questions because I don't think I have the solutions here. I just want to understand your questions a little more, if I can. What I understood from your question was that the words that we use, actually, even technology to a certain extent, actually creates more divisions rather than bringing together, whether we're using the word community or technology. How are we addressing that? Was that the question that you were asking? I'm asking you. No. So just help me understand what is the question that you were asking?
It's not like, so what you all think about it.
Okay. Okay.
One is this idea that so much of what technology to introduce for what purpose, the whole terms of the dialogue are being set too much by people from the
experts.
tech community and not really people for whose apparent interest it's happening. So that how much of them are involved in deciding the terms of the conversation of what digital technology, where and where not.
Okay.
That was one. And the other was, do we hold ourselves to a standard of actually assessing where did that digital technology just overlay on what existed anyway? Is it just reinforcing that power imbalance, or did it transform something? Did it break a power imbalance?
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Just to rephrase what he's saying more pertinent to you, the youth groups that are being formed, what are the profile of these youth groups? Are they upwardly mobile, coming from elite privileged families who have time to invest in digital technologies, devices, and what kind of problems are they trying to address? Whose problems are they trying to address?
I got that.
So, just to, if I can reinterpret what Rakshita is saying, it's not that we cannot do things for the elite and the privileged people, but are we conscious of that? And are we conscious that the solutions that work for them, that interest them, may not be the solutions that are relevant to, slum children living in slums? And are we conscious about the need that if you want to be inclusive, do we have programs for them also, which need not be the same?
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for the reinterpretation as well. So I'll just speak from our experience because that's what I'm aware of more deeply. First of all, I don't know anybody in NGO sector who has access to tech expertise. We really can't afford them. And most of the people who worked on the platform, on the messaging, on the design, came from our own organization. These were mentors, these were ninjas, these were people who actually knew the problem firsthand from the ground. So whatever was designed in Reap Benefits context was primarily from the problems that we were seeing in the last 10 years where tech actually did not exist so much. And for us, one thing has actually helped us in terms of ensuring that technology is not front and center. The young person or the ninja, as we call them, they are front and center of everything that we do. When that becomes front and center, then technology is an enabler, one of the ways, but not the only way. And we are very mindful of the fact that whatever we are doing for the young people, is it enabling them in their journey or not? Whether it's technology, whether it's community, whether it's whatever program that we are doing. So that, I think, helps us realign again and again and again. And even in Assam, the division that you spoke about was a conversation we had last week, actually. Because this happens. Although the program runs in all districts of Assam, and it reaches rural, we don't, Jal Jeevan Mission in Assam right now is not working in urban, it's working in rural. So these are children from tribal areas, children in hilly areas, children in far-flung villages who somehow have access to that. But still we came back to the question, who are the children we are leaving out? And how do we, not just Reap Benefit, but the whole state PMU team, we sat together, our collaborators, our partners, we all sat together and thought about this question, how do we reach the children who don't have access? What do we make happen at the district level, at the community level for all children to get involved with that. Do we talk to schools? Do we talk to teachers? Do we talk to ASHA workers? But that comes when you have a value alignment with whoever you are working with, whether it's technology or partner or state government. When that value alignment is clear, then technology is a hammer. And you decide who, or not just you decide, but they decide who the hammer should be best placed with, and whoever is best skilled to use that. It's just one of the means. But the challenge still remains in addressing diversity, in ensuring gender is included, age is included, caste is included. And that's still, again, something that we keep collaborating, we keep asking questions from the young people, not just the young people, from their families, from the villages where they come from the district level people who are working on the ground, the functionaries. All of them can contribute to what next for us. It's not just one question. So I feel keeping why you are here, why we are here, what is the purpose of what we are doing, and how is it helping the young person, keeping that front and center of every dialogue that we have helps us make sense a little bit of why we are using technology as well.
I can try and I'll also try and address these questions in the way I can. So I'll start off with biases in the data. And biases in the data mostly because some unintended interpretation can lead to consequences that are harmful for certain people. And eBird data, I think like many other data sets, is quite complex and needs to be used very carefully to not result in some form of injustice. So an easy example is, let's say, if you just, there's some publication that came out in Bangalore City where they said that certain birds, black rump flamebacks, and there's certain species that are increasing in the city over the past many years. And this was an analysis done by a research group. And there are, I don't know what consequences will be there from these results, but it tells a story that actually the data does not say at all. And this is not because this is because when you deal with the data in ways that do not account for these biases that are there, and there are very many biases in data set like eBird, because the data is not being collected from everywhere. It's not being collected by everybody. There's a lot of patchiness. And if it's not analyzed properly, there are inferences that are completely that can be completely wrong, completely misaligned with reality. And this was one such case, but there can be many such cases if these biases are not dealt with. So the only way really to deal with biases is for people to become more and more systematic as they collect the data, and for there to be complete representation, but that's a really, really, really long way away. But politics, again, the birding community is typically upper caste, male, urban. There's a strong bias in practically every element, and this can make a big difference, not in terms of how the data is collected as well, in terms of how the tools are designed, but I think most worryingly about how the data will be used, or how any kind of inference will be made, because at the moment it's largely made by communities that have a certain set of problems. So for example, one of the things in State of India's birds, there was an analysis done inside and outside protected areas. There were also analyses done in ONEs and outside ONEs, agricultural areas and outside agricultural areas. The only place where we have seen this being used after that is by people who said that, who used an example from a protected area, saying that certain species is doing better in that protected area than outside. And that can be problematic because that is, it is not really, it's not a common pursuit, protected areas, and it can be really problematic for people outside. Unfortunately, that result is put out there, and but the many other results that say that, for example, agriculture is great for Indian coursers. There is and that surprised everyone, that Indian coursers seem to do better in agriculture or fallow agriculture than even, undisturbed, whatever, less used ONEs. And there is a lot of evidence for so many other species that protected areas seem to make absolutely no difference in bird trends. But the only example that's been used is this particular one. So that's problematic. I don't know how it really need to be careful about how this is put out. And there needs to be much better representation in the birding community. And there's another aspect here of birding politics where there are always curators. There are curators of the data. These are spread out. Curators are spread out across the country. But again, these people end up being leaders, and these people are again typically upper caste male. And there is some attempt being made to do something about this. There are at least in terms of gender representation. But I think it's a slow process, and obviously not doing as much as we can do, because nobody really knows how to do it. But yeah, a lot of problems in that field. Yeah.
No, no, absolutely. So just coming to that, I think it's great that we are uncovering so many complexities, right? And that's the whole point, that it's not just a rosy picture, but starting from purpose specification, that who needs this? What is the problem to solve? And then building up further on that. And that's actually exactly what we'll be also doing in the next session, to start with problems, to dissect problems. And then after that, to think about how tech and data can play a role. Yeah. So we're also running out of time, but we have time for a couple of reactions. Yeah. Maybe we won't have time for response, but yeah. Yeah.
My question was on a slightly different note. When we are building and creating an open data platform, I want to ask the panelists, is there a dilemma between when we want to scale it up with respect to the data that we have, and how do we scale it up, in what geographies or in what components, while also maintaining a certain standard of data? Because in my experience, it's very there comes a moment where you need to decide what is the objective of the platform that you run. So when it comes to scaling up, it's also about then compromising not on the quality, but let's say on the quantity of the data. But as we all have said, that data also needs to have a certain narrative, and you decide what that narrative should be based on the initiative that you have. So what is it in your experience? What are the choices you made that led to the platforms that you have created to be a certain way with respect? So how do you balance the dilemma between scaling up and making data making data as an evidence and not just merely as information? Yeah. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ishani from IT for Change. I had two questions. The first being, we are all having conversations about how data does have immense potential, and no doubt it does. But how do we find a balance between creating a data system, but also making sure that the onus of being visible within this data set doesn't fall on whoever that particular individual might be? So as I'm saying this, I'm thinking of a particular instance in terms of how there is the whole Ayushman Bharat digital mission happening at the moment, which is essentially that you come up with a health ID, you don't need papers anymore, and so on. We've seen a similar thing happen with Aadhaar, where essentially for people to have access to very essential welfare benefits, they now had to find out ways in which they can fit within this data set. And that entirely became the individual's burden. If your fingerprint is not red, you won't get access to ration, simple as that. So how do we find a way to make sure data systems work for the people and not really against them? I guess that ties into the use case approach, but just another line of thought. And the second question I had was regarding what role does institutionalizing these community monitoring measures plays? Because, for instance, with the National Rural Livelihoods Mission, where we've seen social audits become a thing, and there were community workers who were actually collecting data at the ground level and just checking very simple statistics in terms of like 10 crores were given, 9 crores were spent, we need 9 crores next time, so on and so forth. But then there wasn't an institutional body at the ministry level who was dealing with this data on a day-to-day basis. So that happens either that it's not actually read, or on the other hand, someone comes up to you with data that's telling you that, hey, your brilliant scheme is falling short on these 3 or 4 accounts. Can you please fix it? And they don't want to hear that criticism, so the data is again ignored. So I'm just wondering how these gaps could be bridged.
But yeah, I think that's the whole point, right? That it's not, there's no straightforward answer and it's not no silver bullet. But let's give it to Deborah now for summarizing what we want to do in the next week.
Yes, so thank you all very much for a very engaging discussion, and that was also the point of today, not really to, not to present work or anything, because everybody is doing work, everybody is trying to make a difference and all of that, but really to uncover these complexities and these things that are not so much talked about, right? When it's tech and data, but what are we designing? What are the politics behind it? Who are the people? Are we designing? We say we're doing it for, but it shouldn't be for, it should be with, right? And they people who use these systems know best what is needed, if at all it is needed. Can't be that hammer looking for the nail. So what we're going to do now is, I hope all of you, I'm sure, I know that there are a few people who can't make it tomorrow, but I'm hoping all of you will join us again tomorrow and day after. As we really, tomorrow we'll be kind of putting tech aside, but kind of trying to think through what are those problems that are nagging us. And it'll be different for each of you in your own fields of work, right? At different levels. So unpacking those, what are the problems, what are the opportunities that we are grappling with? And then on the day after that is when we again say, is there something that tech can do? And if tech can do it, how do we do it? Right? So then, and this is really, these 3 days again are not like, it's not a solutioning effort. It's rather just to bring us all into the group. And what we're trying to do with this whole convening with the work Common Ground and FES and all of us are doing together is really to, bring people together, pick these difficult problems, find ways to work together, find alignment, find complementarities. There are people here who are, some of them are really working and engaging with these questions of politics around information systems. Some of them are developing tech. There are others who are using these, right? So can we also, this is also kind of a space to be talking to each other, right? Like Sarah asked, Rakshita, what did you really mean? So those kind of conversations, and then we draw from that, and then we, take this whole work ahead. So that's really the idea. Hope you'll join us. All of you join again tomorrow, day after. We have the plenary starting in, I think, 10 minutes. So grab quick coffee over there, and hopefully see you tomorrow. And yes, those who didn't get their questions answered, please make sure to catch not just the panelists, but other people in this group.